Joining me now, the legend, Ben Braun. I feel like I can say that once your name is actually placed on a basketball court.
Well, it's still surreal to me. So you can say it all you like, but until I see it, until it happens, and you know, it's a great honor. I'm humbled, and I hope I can share this with the players, the coaches, the community that were such a big part of the success we had.
What was it like when they first notified you, Ben, this is what we're thinking. We'd like to name the court after you.
Well, Roy Wilbanks approached me, and Roy has been so instrumental in my career. He was really arguably my biggest critic, but my biggest supporter too. And I say that in a good way because he brought this to me, and I said, wow, it did blow me away. But I said, Roy, I'll accept this honor, but I want to do it with the understanding that I can bring my players and my coaches back and all the community back and rally behind this. And I hope that we've been able to do that.
Let's go back to the beginning a little bit. When you first arrive on campus at Eastern Michigan, talk about what it was like first coming in as an assistant.
Well, I had never been an assistant. To be honest, I've been a head coach. Well, I've been an assistant in high school, but I was a head coach for 8 years at Siena Heights College. I only knew one way. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so Jim Boyce was very kind to offer me the position of his associate or assistant head coach. And I just went in there and tried to help him the best I can. It was a surprise to me that he resigned, but I still to this day think Jim resigned knowing that he was going to step down, and he wanted me to give me the opportunity to coach. And I've always been indebted to him for that. He said, "You'll be fine. You should be the head coach of this team this year." So I really appreciated that.
And you were young, and then all of a sudden, you're the head coach at a Division I basketball program. That's a lot.
Well, it's a lot, but the only thing for me is I've never really treated coaching, whether it was high school, NEI at Siena Heights or Eastern Michigan, any differently. I think there's a way to coach young men. There's a way to compete. And I don't think really you can put a division on that. Some of my best players at Siena Heights could have played at Eastern Michigan. Certainly some of my best players at Eastern Michigan could have played at Cal. So I just think that sometimes there's too much placed on that. But I was fortunate that I was able to draw upon my head coaching experiences.
Ben, it was a really wonderful era of college basketball. While you were here, you started going to the NCAA tournament. It's one thing to be a coach at a Division I school. It's another to get the team to the NCAA tournament and do it 3 times. For you, what was kind of the secret sauce for you?
Well, we had very competitive practices, and I always felt that if your practices were harder than your games, you had a chance to be really good. And sometimes your players didn't understand that. They didn't know why we were so demanding. We had early morning practices. Earl Boykins didn't like it, that's for sure. And I kid with him to this day. We're still very close. But I think the discipline of getting up early, the discipline of having to make 10 free throws in a row before you go home, the discipline of having to talk on defense. I made our players play 4-on-5, 5 against 7, and they thought that was unfair. But we tried to create atmosphere in practice that was going to be more difficult than the game, and try to create habits in practice that would carry over to the game. And we always gave our players a very competitive schedule. We didn't play cupcakes. We played very difficult teams, and we did very well against those teams.
You brought up the name Earl Boykins. He's a legend here as well. When you were recruiting him, what was the sell, and were you surprised when you finally got him?
Well, Earl wasn't highly recruited, but either was Lorenzo Neely when he was in high school, and he might have been the most important recruit we ever had here. He came in when Grant Long was finishing his career, and he helped our team to become better. He was tough. He was unselfish. He was a role player, and Earl was much the same way. Although Earl had the ability to score at his size, I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, I said, Earl, you're going to be mismatched many nights. Are you going to be able to handle it? He says, Coach, he said, I've got the mismatch in my favor. He said, I've played against big guys my whole life. Big guys have never played against anybody my size. And I said, that's pretty ingenious of him to look at the game that way.
When you looked at the type of players you wanted to bring to Eastern Michigan, sometimes, these days, are they the right height, right size? Some other guys are just like, can they play basketball? When you were looking at like a prototypical guy you wanted on the court for you at Eastern Michigan, what were some of the things on that checklist?
Well, I always thought it was important to have a great work ethic, to be unselfish, to not care about who gets the credit. You can be the leading scorer on your team, but if your team's not winning, I don't think that's going to do you much good. So can you make the players around you better? The players we recruited sometimes made the guys around them better, and that meant they were good recruits, or they were able to fit in, maybe play their role to the best of their abilities. So recruiting's not an exact science. I've let many good players go that I thought maybe weren't as good, and they ended up being better. But you got to have a little luck, but you also have to have a system. You have to have a great coaching staff. I had tremendous coaches when we were here. We were able to break down. Each coach would take 3 or 4 guys, work with those guys. So I always felt that each coach or each player had like their own mentor, not just the head coach, but the assistant coaches. And we spent a lot of time mentoring these players, not just on the floor, but off. And then we had a great support crew when I was here at Eastern Michigan. And I think that's important when you're recruiting players, that you want to nurture them and bring them along.
A lot of guys that played for you have moved on to great success. One of them's the head coach here at Eastern Michigan, and Stan Heath.
I have great stories on Stan. I still think.
Let's hear them.
No, Stan Heath, to me, I've recruited Stan. I've known Stan probably longer than anybody other player here at Eastern. I recruited Stan when I was at Siena Heights. I was upset that I couldn't get him to come play for me there, but he got too good. And then he was recruited by Eastern Michigan, and I said, Stan, that's a great offer. You got to take that. Met his family. Just not only a great player, but he's even a greater person. But Stan was instrumental, I think, in me getting the job at Eastern for 2 reasons. One, as people were watching me coach this team, we went into Notre Dame and we lost in overtime, and we probably should have beat them. But Stan was one of the guys that was battling their All-American David Rivers and helping us get to the overtime of that game, or to into that game. So his competitive play helped us. And then we went to play Grand Valley State Division II school on the road. And Stan came off the bench and single-handedly turned that game around. And I tell him, if we had lost that game, there's no way Eastern Michigan would have hired a coach that couldn't beat a Division II school. So I give Stan credit for me being at Eastern Michigan.
I always feel like the Sweet 16 banner in the gym should just be a little bit bigger. What an amazing run. When you think back on that season and taking Eastern Michigan to the Sweet 16, what stands out in your mind?
Well, we had, it was the 3rd time we had won the championship, our 2nd time we'd won the championship with the same guys that won it as freshmen and sophomores. So this was not their first rodeo. They not only believed they should be in the tournament, they believed they should advance and have a chance to play for a national title. My feeling to this day is, and it's been my misfortune, we had to play against North Carolina and Dean Smith, and it happened to me twice in my career, that we get to the Sweet 16 and we have to play against Dean Smith and his teams. But our team had a lot of confidence. We held our own. I thought we were in control in a lot of the first half of that game, and then they got away in the second half. But just to get our team to that point, we had to win at Eastern. We had to win the conference tournament championship. If we don't win our conference tournament championship, I don't know that we're going to get an at-large. So it put a lot of pressure on us. But if you think about it, our team not only won the regular season, but they won the conference tournament championship. So I knew that team was special. We got by 2 games in the tournament and beat a Big Ten team, actually, and a great Mississippi State team, Penn State. So we had a good team, and I'm proud of those guys. And that team, I think, is still together. They're very close to this day.
And of course, the guy that told the story of that era and for a long time at Eastern Michigan, John Fountain, passed away this past week. A legend at Eastern Michigan, and will always be known as the voice of the university. Your thoughts on John?
Well, it does. It's emotional for me. It almost brings a tear to my eye, because it was a year ago today. I came back to do a game, and John drove to see me at 90 plus, gets in his car, drives in, gives me a big hug. But John was more than a great announcer, play-by-play, and maybe one of the best I've been around. But he was also a family guy. He was also a friend. He was a personal friend. He was a friend to our players. He was a friend to our coaching staff. And whenever we went to games, he was there. I can still hear his voice today. And he brought our fans together. When we played these great games on the road, it was his voice and his description of the game that brought the excitement back to Bowen Fieldhouse. And I don't think any of it happens without John Fountain. So there'll be a special place in my heart, everybody's heart, I think, as you look back now and you embrace Eastern Michigan basketball. John Fountain's going to be a part of that forever.
I wanted to ask you this, Ben. Obviously, as you're having these great runs with Eastern Michigan, I'm sure a lot of schools came knocking at your door. What was it about Cal that finally got you out of Ypsilanti and over to the West Coast?
Well, a couple things, and it's a great question. I didn't want to leave. I thought Eastern was the great place for me. They were going to build a new gym, and had to go to Earl Boykins, and I think Derek Dial basically asked them their blessing, because I said, look, I'm going to be there for you guys through your graduation. And I said, I'm not leaving you without your approval. And they said, Coach, you got to go. It's a great opportunity. Take it. And they also knew, I think, and I explained it to them, I had my family living out in California, my brother, my sister, my father. They all lived on the West Coast. And I had been apart from them for 20 years. So it gave me a chance to get back to see family. I'd been to Berkeley a number of times. I knew a lot of people, even some of the guys that were on the team then. They had a potential to be a good team, and it was the Pac-12, or Pac-10 at the time. And Berkeley's kind of a crazy place. It's, if you haven't been there, it's a fun place. I'd been going there for years and visiting Northern California, so it was a great opportunity. And if it wasn't Cal, I don't know that I would have gone. So, and then we were able to get some success there. But I try not to look back because it brings a lot of emotion to me. But I was happy that Eastern was was able to go and have some success after I left, which was a credit to those players and coaches that continued the success of the program.
And we'll finish where we started. And now, after all that, your name is going to be on the court. You're immortalized forever. What does that mean to you, Ben?
Well, first, I got to say, it's George Gervin and me. We're on the court together, and I played basketball against George. I don't know, people don't realize that, but they don't realize I played against him when I was a freshman at Wisconsin Lacrosse. Of course, his team came in at Eastern and waxed us that game, and they're pretty good. And then I got a chance to hang out with George after the game. Great guy. But my standard line now, I'm going to use this forever, is George and I are fittingly on the court together because we combined for over 600 college wins. And then people say, well, he never coached. I said, well, that's okay. And he and I combined for over 25,000 points in the NBA. And of course, I never played in the NBA. But it's fitting. It's an honor to be on the court with George. But it's just an honor to be, as you say, to have my name on a court where it meant so much for our teams, our coaches, our players, and our community. It was a special time. But I would like to see nothing more, see nothing happen, that maybe could bring some of those days back. I think Eastern's always had a vision and a record and a tradition of success, whether it's basketball, baseball, football, track. I remember some of the great years here, and teams are still doing well. But I hope that this can be something, and I can be a part of the future success of Eastern. But to have my name on there is awfully special. Still a little bit surreal to me, but hopefully I'll get used to it. But I guess then finally, to say the last thing, I've got my family here with me. My wife made the trip, my son who's now in high school, my daughter who's in junior high. They're able to see this. They actually think their dad did something for a living. They only saw me a little bit coaching at Rice University, didn't see me at Cal. My son was just born when I was coaching at Cal. So for them to see this and for me to share that with them means the world to me. So thank you for asking.
You did a lot of great things. Welcome home. It's always good to have you here. Thank you for your time, Ben.
Thank you, buddy.